Today on Recruiting Roundtable, we are discussing building engineering teams. We're going to touch on topics such as technical interviews, optimizing your hiring process, and how to retain top engineering talent. Joining us, we have three amazing guests. They are all engineering leaders. We have Artur Kuzmin, Director of Engineering at Squire. We have Emma Catlin, Head of Engineering at Formerly, and Vassili Skarine, Head of Engineering at Cybersyn. Artur, Emma, Vassili, thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, it's gonna be a good one. So why don't we start with just a round of intros? If you could just give me maybe a brief intro of yourself and your background, a little bit about your company, that would be fantastic. Let's start with Artur.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Artur. I'm in tech for around 10 years by now, and I did a lot of different things. Did some Android, backend, and recently became a manager. And overall, I just like doing kind of everything and making sure everything works smoothly. I work at Squire. We create software for barbershops.
That's great. And I am a Squire user. I actually used it this morning to book an appointment with my barber for Friday. So great job.
Oh, that's cool to know.
It works perfectly. Like I told you in a pre-show, my barber used to sometimes ghost me when I would like DM him, but now like he can't ghost me. I just book and show up. Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma. I am head of engineering at Formerly. I've been here for just 2 years now. And before this, I was actually an infrastructure engineer at Pinterest. So this is my first startup I'm at. And at Formerly, we are building a legal collaboration platform to help folks come immigrate to the US and have that whole process be a little bit more smooth as we can make it.
That's great. Also, a newer engineering leader, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
That's great. So we've had two fairly new engineering leaders who walked into their role. That's great. Vassili.
Hi, my name is Vassili. I'm a head of engineering at Cybersyn. I've been here for about a year and a half. I was first employee and kind of grew with the company. I've been in tech probably for the past 15 years, and my, superpower is to go from being first engineer to building out the first team and first product. Cybersyn is a company that builds sort of real-time view into the economy, and we work with a lot of interesting data sets to do that.
That's excellent. All right. Thank you, Vassili. It's great to meet you all. And lastly, my name is Sean Huynh. I'm managing director at Rocket. At Rocket, we take a scientific approach to recruiting by combining our talented recruiters and our AI model that we've trained over 7 years and our programmatic sourcing techniques. We help our clients find and engage candidates in ways that are basically impossible to do with LinkedIn. So that's us. All right. So let's get into it. I want to talk about your approach in building teams. So all of you have startup experience. I think, Emma, you were at Pinterest, you mentioned. Vassili, if I'm not mistaken, you were at Snap for a little bit, right? And
yeah, I was Snap and Meta.
And Meta. So you've worked at some bigger companies, right? And Artur, have you been primarily at startups for your
career? I've been primarily at startups. And okay. Squire is like 200 people startup, so I know mid-size,
yeah.
Something like that.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about your approach to building your team as it relates to the size of your organization. And if you feel like your approach to interviewing or the types of candidates that you're going to be hiring changes depending on if you have, let's say, a team of 2 and you're growing to 10, or if you have a team of already 20 and you're going to grow to 50. Maybe we'll start with Artur. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Sure. I've been working in remote startups for the last 7 years, and the first startup I worked at was like 15 people in total, and probably 10 of them in tech. And the kind of skill sets that you need when there are just like a few folks, in my opinion, differs a lot compared to, for example, Squire, when we have around like 50 engineers, or like bigger companies when they have thousands. The earlier the stage is, the more generic kind of engineers should be. And that's basically where I excel at. That's what I like. Again, I can do Android, I can do backend, I can do some front end, and I can do everything. But of course, like most of that will not be as good as somebody who spent like 10 years working on one platform.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that this kind of skill set is very important for smaller teams because, again, like everyone just wears many different hats, and that's the necessity. With time, when the company grows, you need much more specialization, and recruiting is kind of reflects this value. So that's, I guess, the first thesis I'd like to throw into this chat.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've heard that quite a bit from our different clients as well. Emma, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely building off of what Artur said too. We are at the very early stage. So my team is just 7 of us right now on the engineering side. So it's definitely been indexing on those generalist skill sets of just being excited to build from 0 to 1, like he mentioned, as well as looking for folks who are interested in learning. So if you're excited to learn and just, passionate about learning and willing to learn on the job, I think that is such a huge asset for an early team because you really need to be able to dive in and just be excited to learn about whatever problem we need to learn about today, whether that is something you've never encountered before or something even maybe outside of the engineering role. Maybe you need to help out with some sales.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Vassili, what are your thoughts on this topic?
To add on top of that, I want to say that for the first probably 30 people in the company, what matters a lot is a culture fit and personality fit, because people have to interact with everybody. Once you get a little bit bigger, then you start breaking into more teams, and you can hire people specifically for the team that fits the team lead. But when you're very early, it really matters that everyone gets along together very well. So personality fit is a huge part of like first 15, 30 people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I hear that quite a bit too from our clients. I want to just touch on the kind of more generalist topic. Vassili, do you feel the same way that in the first, let's say 20, 30 hires, you're hiring more generalists, or would you say you're hiring more like specialists at that stage?
Definitely generalists. Definitely people who are curious, want to innovate, and creatively cut corners.
Yeah. So, I want to touch on that because a lot of, so I've been in agencies for a while. I ran my own agency for about 4 years before joining Rocket as well. So our clients, a lot of times they want people that are specialists. Like even if they're startups, they want them to be very strong in, let's say, a particular programming language or a certain technology stack. But I'm hearing, and these are startups, but I'm hearing that we're looking for more generalists. And then when they get a resume where somebody has maybe jumped from back end to full stack to mobile to DevOps, sometimes there's like pushback that, this candidate, there isn't like focus in what they're trying to do. I'll start with you, Vassili. Do you feel that way when you see a resume that's, where the particular candidate's been doing all sorts of different things? Does it feel unfocused to you, or do you like that because it shows that they have a lot of sort of diverse background and experience?
There's a skill set of shipping things, getting things done. And if the person has jumped around and actually shipped stuff, then it's actually a benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Emma, what's your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. I wouldn't, throw away someone's resume from having that diverse skill set. I would want to get curious and ask questions, hear about their journey, hear about, if they had that shipping mindset at their different roles. And maybe it does mean that they're just excited to learn different things. And that could be a huge asset for my team, but it definitely depends on the time and the stage that, my team and the company's at and what we need next.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Artur?
And I like this point on what we need next, because as an engineering leader, usually you see what's needed. Because maybe those companies that you chatted with, Sean, sorry, they were mostly having this like generalist already, and they understood that, okay, we don't have anyone who can create this like super different and complex animation on front end. And then they're looking for someone who actually is specializing in front end and ideally knows this like animations well and stuff like that. And the same can be told about any other stack, because oftentimes when companies start, especially like with this founding engineer and so on, I believe a lot of times people hire actually generalists just because they know that, okay, we need somebody who will be able to do everything. And as a result, when you've got this like 5 to 10 people like big team, usually you already have generalists, and likely when they start hiring some more, that's when they understand that, okay, actually I need this skill set, and that's basically when they come to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in this market, have you, I'll stay with you, Artur, has there been any kind of unique challenges that you've been kind of dealing with in terms of hiring? And has it changed, let's say, in 2024 versus 2023? Have those challenges changed for you?
Yeah, I believe these challenges changed a lot in a way that the market kind of turned. Previously, it was the candidates market. Now I would say that it's like a companies market. And what I mean by that is that previously recruiters had to find these people somehow and blah, 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 and it was hard to bring them. And now my friend works at Shopify. They were looking for a customer success manager. They basically opened this job listing on their site, and they closed it the same evening, getting more than 1,100 resumes.
Wow.
And from a challenge of like, okay, we get like, I don't know, just a few people, let's try to get somebody. Now we've got like another one. Okay, we've got 1,100. What do we do? Do we just, I don't know, random 1,000, and then whomever scored less than 20, just like drop them, because you can't even really go through this amount of resumes. And I see that even we as a kind of mid-sized company have similar, I wouldn't say it's like a problem, but we have a similar situation that we just post about the job somewhere, and we get a lot of resumes that's just basically both a good and a bad thing, I guess, at the same time.
Yeah, interesting. Vasily, are you seeing the same thing? A lot more job inbound applications?
Definitely a lot more than last year, for sure.
Yeah, and what are some things that what your team is doing to try to filter through all these resumes?
I guess we just go through them and sort of bucket and see if we want to interview it or not. We only have like one opening for engineering, so it's not that it wasn't a problem for now.
Okay,
Definitely
that's
get
cool.
a lot more interesting candidates.
Emma, what about you? Are you seeing more volume, or?
Yeah, we've tried adding some pre-screener questions too, of not just like collecting resumes, but having folks, add a little bit more detail, some things that we normally would ask in a screener call, so that we can start doing some of that filtering before having to hop on the phone with everyone too, because we do want to make sure we can connect with all of the candidates who come in, even though we are early and tiny stage.
It is tough. One of our guests on the show said that they rejected, I think it was 56,000 candidates in 2023, which is just an obscene number. But that's across everything, not just engineering. But that's unbelievable volume, right? And it's a lot of layoffs, unfortunately, have been happening, which is why a lot of people are available. Let's pivot a bit to when you're interviewing engineers. I'm interested in the types of qualities you're looking for. I mean, obviously, there's like technical competency. Vasily, you talked a little bit about culture fit, but I'm curious if you individually, if there are certain things that you index on, maybe just a little bit more when you're hiring that you really care about. I'd love to get your feedback. Let's start with Emma.
Sure. I'm definitely looking for, like I mentioned before, that excitement and willingness to learn. That's so important, because even if you don't have, the specific tech stack that we're currently working on in your last job experience, if you're willing to learn, you'll be willing to jump right in and be excited to learn what tech stack we're on right now. And also have been looking for strong communicators, especially at such an early stage team. We need someone who's able to communicate both with the technical folks to facilitate collaboration, as well as the non-technical teammates too, to make sure we're really gelling and all on the same page and can move as fast as we need to move.
Yeah, communication is a huge one. But you know what I found? I worked at a software engineering company for a couple of years, maybe close to 5 years. And some of the best engineers are not the best communicators. Like they just, and vice versa. So it's sometimes interesting, because like we did client facing work, and we would want our engineers interfacing with the clients, but sometimes like the most brilliant engineers, that just wasn't they weren't comfortable doing that. So we'd have to kind of put a project manager in between to kind of help facilitate those conversations. But it's interesting that you mentioned that. Vasili, what about yourself? When you're interviewing candidates, what are some of the key things you're indexing on?
For me, what I find important is their philosophy around engineering. and how to approach it, because there's different ways to build software, and like my way in startups sometimes doesn't align with everybody. So I index on that as well. I like checking references. That's another big thing.
Yeah,
And obviously like some basic coding stuff.
What about like flexibility in terms of the approach? Because I know that I've been in situations where there's been like some butting of the heads in terms of like, hey, we're gonna solve this problem. Engineer A wants to solve it one way, engineer B wants to go another way. Do you try to ask questions around that and how they like solve those in the past, or like how do you kind of interview so that when you have someone coming in that they're going to be easy to work with and open to collaborating and not like butting heads with your other engineers?
Right. You ask questions during the interview. You ask them for example situations. You give them example situations and tell them how they solve stuff. For example, just to give like two different philosophies, in some places, people want to do things well in engineering and follow the best practices. My personal view is that in a startup, if you do everything perfect in engineering, you're just going to run out of money. So it's better to iterate towards something rather than start with a perfect solution. And there's different ways to build software. Again, like none of them are wrong, but it's like you want your team to gel together. You don't want to have unnecessary friction. For example, you don't want to care about should tabs to be 2 spaces or 4 spaces, should be tabs or spaces and things like that. Those it actually happened in one of the companies I used to work for, where CTO and one of the engineers were fighting for it for like a week, right? And those frictions are just unnecessary. You want to remove the frictions because you're trying to build some things fast. So you want to align the team and go towards the goal.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Artur, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. This is an interesting topic. What do you look for when you're interviewing?
Yeah, first of all, I'd be interested to chat with Vassili about references, maybe like later. And for now, in terms of what to look for, I think primarily I'm looking for accountability and ownership, because in a startup, and I am a big hater of like micromanagement. So instead, what I prefer to do, similarly what Vassili says, that's the goal. Tell me how will we get there. And yes, I organize the team so again we have the same spaces or whatever. But again, you said it once, and you just like use the linter or whatever to support it. But again, what's important to me is that this team will function without me kind of looking into each and every task, ticket, whatever, and they will produce good results. And good results, again, it depends. Depending on the stage, depending on the timelines and stuff like that. Sometimes it is okay, it can be quick and dirty, but it should work like in a week. And sometimes, okay, that's an architectural piece that we'll be building upon for the next like 5 years. So let's make sure that it is solid. And I am looking for people who can understand these differences and who can do both, because oftentimes you need to be able to do both.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about, so we talked a lot about startups and kind of having like a startup mindset and being able to, kind of iterate and work on the fly. I want to ask about like FANG companies, because I know that there's some startups that we talk to that they're like, yeah, we love FANG engineers. And then others are like, we prefer to avoid it. I'd love to get each of your thoughts on this topic specifically in terms of, do you actively try to recruit from FANG companies? Do you actively try not to, or does it matter? Maybe we'll start with Vassili. I'm interested in your thoughts. Since, if I'm not mistaken, I think you worked at a FANG company.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
I worked at Meta, and then I used to work for Firebase, acquired by Google. So, and Snapchat was interesting because it was like a lot of different FANG companies combined together, so you can see the cultures. There's different cultures in different companies. Some clash together, some don't. It's interesting topic because I look at individual as individual, and I kind of interview them as that. So I don't usually look at their backgrounds. Some companies like Meta that do iterations, which kind of aligns with my philosophy a lot more. So but again, it depends on the individual. So I don't usually care where they come from. as long as, I'll ask them about philosophy and maybe we'll code together for a little bit during interview, and then we'll kind of determine if we can work together. But I don't necessarily go for or against Fang.
Okay, so we have one vote for neutral. Artur, what's your feedback? What are you voting on?
Yeah, I think it will be kind of neutral as well, but we don't have Fang engineers. And I guess one of the things is that, again, at my role, I'm thinking about budgets and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And again, like last two companies I worked at, we are heavily distributed. And it's not just like East Coast to West Coast, but it's basically West Coast to Novosibirsk, Russia, I don't know, like Thailand, France, whatever. And as a result, it helps company to be kind of more, budget oriented, to have a better ROI, I believe, in most of the cases, in terms of being able to hire talent that is very skillful and very experienced for the kind of a fraction of a price that a typical Fang engineer, especially living somewhere in California or New York, will expect to be paid due to the cost of living and stuff like that. And I think if I were a business owner, that would be another, I would kind of think absolutely the same. And maybe a Fang is a nice filter that, okay, at least someone interviewed them, that probably they have went through some coding exercises. Again, I think that this coding exercises are just like a bit of everything that a good engineer should have. And again, seeing some people coming from Fang companies who used to, and again, as Vassili mentioned, different Fang companies have different cultures, level of bureaucracy and stuff like that. And seeing how some people come and they okay, we need a document here, we need a document there, I need an approval from that person, I don't know what told me to do this, blah, 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 blah. Just because they used to work in this big machine, it doesn't work. It doesn't always work well in smaller startups. And that's what I have noticed. So that's a kind of a disadvantage. Again, advantage is probably someone already, they went through some filtering previously and probably a high level filtering, with a high bar. So probably they are worth something. So you know it by default compared to somebody who worked in different companies. So that's the pros. And as a result, again, I'll probably stay neutral.
Okay, we got kind of a neutral. I'm feeling a little bit more like you're avoiding Fang a bit, but
again, primarily costs. Yeah, I guess.
Maybe not.
I'm closer to business now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I get it. No, it makes total sense. And it's funny. There's a lot of engineers right now become professional interviewers. They can pass these Fang style interviews because they do them so often. Unfortunately. Yeah. All right, Emma, let's take us home. What's your thoughts on the Fang topic?
Sure. Ultimately, I'm trying to build an inclusive environment for my team. And I think that means looking for folks from different types of backgrounds. So I'm not trying to exclude a certain type of background, whether that's, coming from another company, coming from another country, coming from, boot camp versus university background. I think everyone's different perspectives that they can take from their backgrounds if they're able to think about carefully, which pieces are actually applicable in the startup environment can be really good assets to have on the team because a diverse set of perspectives and ideas can really help us be successful together.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a great point. It's a great way to approach hiring for sure and building a team. Let's talk about a meaty topic in terms of engineering, which is technical interviews. Everyone has kind of their own flavor and approach to it. Emma, I'll start with you. How do you typically like to approach technical interviews?
Sure. I'm definitely, when I'm doing technical interviews, trying to determine a few things. But mainly the main thing is, how do they problem solve? And are they willing to be humble and own up to, even if you don't know the answer to something like that, actually owning up to it is a better answer than trying to BS your way through the answer too. But I'm more curious about hearing the questions candidates ask me, especially, during software architecture style interviews, and seeing that collaboration between other teammates too, kind of like what Vassili was touching on earlier. If we're doing, more of a live coding or like collaboration session thinking about architecture, because being able to collaborate and problem solve together in a low ego way is super, super helpful in the startup environment.
Vassili, what about yourself?
So with new AI tools coming around the corner, I kind of switched the interviews a little bit. In the past, I used to give out kind of like a take-home, which would be representative of the job itself. It would be a very simple one. It would take maybe an hour, 2 hours to complete, if they wish to do that. And then we would kind of, next round would be discussing this. Now, kind of, I feel like all the tools can do it for everybody if it's a simple enough problem. So now I start doing like more of a live coding interviews, also with very specific problem that's relevant to the job.
Have you had folks ask if they can use AI coding tools in the live interview? Because I've had this happen once too.
Not yet, but I had someone submit me a take-home project and saying like, "Oh, there's ChatGPT comments, but I didn't use ChatGPT." So that was funny, but
so okay. Really. So yeah, you were saying you've moved from, so now you're more live coding as opposed to a take home. And in the live coding, are you kind of looking for similar things as Emma is? Is the interaction, or are you just looking for the solution?
It's both. If it's like, first part should be simple enough where it should actually work, and then you kind of like start discussing and talking about, and can go as deep as you want, talking about some specific API that's, a library, how they implement stuff, and then you like decide if you can, talk to them, collaborate with them.
Artur?
Yeah, I heard about this like AI assistants. I use Copilot at my daily job, and I don't see why I shouldn't use it, for example, at a live coding, because that's how I do my work, right? So that's a good question. Should we get back to like whiteboarding and stuff like that? Where is this line? And in our case, we have multiple steps. And again, some of them are almost like just like filtering, okay, are you serious enough to work with us? So you need to fill in a few just like questionnaires about your experience, and it probably filters out the laziest people or people who don't really care where to go. And that's, I guess, also a tricky question, because I believe most of the people don't really care where to go, and that's kind of normal. But again, if we can pick from the ones who are interested in joining us, why not to do this? So yeah, that's, I guess, number one for us. Number two for us is a relatively short technical interview just to check out, okay, they actually know the things that they have written in their resumes. And it's not about, I don't know, like checking out 100 topics, but it's more like, okay, that's what you wrote in your resume. Let's go deep, because we know this stuff deep. That's the whole idea of my team members. And then we have a take-home assignment as well. And as usual, there are pros and cons. We do it in a way that we limit amount of time when they should basically have this thing done within like 3 hours or 4 hours, depending on the platform. And why? Because more than once I saw these assignments like, okay, here is take-home assignment. It is small, it will take you just like an hour or two, but here are like, 48 hours that you have to work on it. And they're like, okay, what do you really want to get from this assignment? How fast can I work? You won't know it, because if you expect it to be done within 2 hours, but maybe I don't have a family and I have a lot of energetics at my room, so I can work like 40 hours and get it done well. So this is something that you will probably not gauge. The same like about priorities and stuff. So I don't like take-home assignments, especially when the people say that, okay, you've got a couple of hours and it should take you a couple of hours, and you're actually given a lot of time. And again, in our take-home assignment, we've got this explicit things that we're looking at. Okay, how can like prioritize stuff like that? And we write that, okay, we know that most likely you won't be able to do it within this like 3 hours, and that's fine. But here is the list of priorities. And some people just do stupid things. and it looks like they don't understand what the priority means. And that's something again that helps me to have people who will be able to work with like priorities at a real job. And as usual, we don't have time to do everything, right? And eventually, with this take-home assignment, regardless of kind of how good or bad is it, we are jumping on a like 40 minutes call where we go with this like code walkthrough. When people walk us through their solution, tell about okay what exactly they did in terms of decisions and why. And this way, first of all, even if we are already sure that okay we will not kind of bring them on board because they already like came here, we kind of returning them at least like sometime by giving our feedback and stuff like that. And at the same time with candidates and like works that we were interested at, we have a chance again to see how would this person behave in such kind of code reviews and team interaction, while also being able to understand, okay, if they really understand or understood why it was like one or another decision made. So that's how we do it.
Interesting. So, I mean, I'm hearing a mix. There's some take homes, there's some live coding. So I think the moral of the story is there isn't a right answer to this question, and you have to iterate.
Yeah, and maybe one more thing. I guess my favorite way of doing interviews, a friend of mine, he or like their company, what they do is that they agree with this like candidate, for example, a data scientist, that okay, you can take a 2-week vacation at your job. We will fly you basically to Barcelona. You'll work with us for these 2 weeks. And then we'll see basically, do you like it? Do we like it? And that's when we will decide basically if you're going to join or not. So their interview process is literally flying a candidate to their office and working with them for a couple of weeks. So I guess that's the kind of ultimate thing. And probably you can't do it when you've got like 50,000 people to filter out a year. But for a smaller scale, that's an interesting way to do it.
That's definitely an interesting approach. But I mean, if I took a 2-week vacation and I didn't get the job, I would be pretty pissed. I feel like that was such a waste.
You were paid for the travel. You were paid. I mean, you had some interesting time. Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy doing what you do, I think that's an interesting experience. So,
well, maybe I'll edit that. I'll be probably upset, but my wife would be really, really upset. All right, so this is the last question. I want to talk a little bit about kind of building an engineering culture and helping with professional development and career growth. Sometimes I hear from candidates, hey, it's like such a small company, or I'll hear a candidate wanting to leave a startup and they feel like they've hit kind of like a ceiling. There's nowhere up to go from here unless my boss leaves. How do you kind of build a culture of kind of growth within your org when maybe it's smaller, and like keep your team motivated and keep them excited to continue to work for the company long term? Let's start with Emma.
Sure. I mean, I'm still very early at this since our team is still so small. So I think there's probably a lot more for me to learn in this area too. What we've done so far is actually published clear engineering levels and expectations at those levels too, which is something, obviously it's much simpler than what we had at Pinterest, but it is something I adapted from talking to other mentors, what I helped with creating at Pinterest to, make it work on a smaller scale. But I think creating clear expectations too helps set everyone else up for success too, because if the expectations are unwritten, you just have to be in the know and have to kind of figure out like, what am I actually supposed to do here? What is expected of me? Which can create a less inclusive environment too, because you have to be one of those in the know folks to be able to know how you were supposed to succeed today and tomorrow and next week.
I mean, it's a pretty simple concept, but I think the simplicity is what's beautiful about it, right? It's like written, it's documented. This is what you have to do. If you do these things, then you should be able to progress. I mean, I love it. Vassili, what about you? How do you foster that kind of professional development, career growth within your engineering team?
Early engineers want ownership. So you want to provide them ownership of something. They love just be responsible owning and getting things end to end. And the more you can provide that, the more you get excited. A lot of them also want to start their own companies, so they see and you show them what things are done behind the scenes to get things done from business side to engineering side, and kind of like showing them how each piece they're working on fits into company success. That's very important for retention, for excitement, for everything. I developed my own methods of how to kind of fit everyone in. I call it kind of dependency graph, whereas you start from where the company is going and you asking like how are you gonna do this, and go to individual projects. It's very helpful, especially when the company is small. When company gets large, it's a little harder to do because things get out of hand, and this is when you can start using something like OKR framework.
Mm-hmm. Ownership's a huge thing. Everybody wants it, not just engineers. Artur, why don't you take us home? Last thoughts on this topic.
Sure. I went through a psychology course that was led by a psychologist, and I believe that's a really good thing for an engineering manager to go through. And the thing that was kind of the highlight of that course for me is that people have different motivations, and kind of everyone understands it, but I kind of really understood it at that moment. And for some people that may be, okay, I am going up to this like career ladder. I was like senior engineer, like engineer 1, engineer 2, 3, whatever. But for some people that won't really matter. And for them, just like having interesting tasks will be more important than whatever like label they've got. For some people, that will be amount of salary, and for other ones, that will be, okay, I just have this kind of hygienic factor, and like, okay, it grows, whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. For some people, it will be, again, ability to see the impact on the org, on clients, on different things. And the first step to kind of set up this understanding, I believe, like for an engineering manager, or again, like just for a manager, is to understand what this particular person is interested at. And that's kind of the, baseline to build upon. And to be honest, I don't really like and believe into all this like career laddering things. And I spent some time researching these career levels at Google, Facebook, Buffer. Just like there is a site called Progression FYI, and you can find different career laddering for tons of different companies. And oftentimes they operate pretty vague terms. Like, just like engineer worked on a big enough project, a senior engineer quota bigger projects, and so on. And eventually, it still feels like a lot of these things are pretty subjective. And of course, they're very different from company to company. That's like staff engineer in one company will be absolutely like different from a staff engineer in another company. And while you are solving this issue, again, for people who want to grow within the company and just like get the either title, either money, either something like that, the biggest part is, again, to understand what they really want to and try to satisfy it. And for example, my internal motivation is just I am like curious. Probably Emma would like to get me as an employee or whatever, because I'm always curious. I'm always trying to get and know something new and stuff like that. And you can even see it in my resume as well, that again, like Android, backend, engineering management, like different things. And now what motivates me is that I work with people from different departments, like marketing, operations, sales, and so on. And I'm trying to understand how we as a tech org can help them. And again, that's what actually drives me. And you wouldn't find it in a regular, like here's our career laddering thing. And not for an engineer, not for a manager position. And that's my point.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Thank you so much, Vassili, Artur, and Emma. That was a great episode. We learned a ton, and I think a big takeaway is, individual motivations matter, right? And if you get, we're people at the end of the day, right? So if you get to know your employees and even when you're recruiting, especially what those individual motivations are, you'll have a better job, positioning the right opportunities, and in that case, spending less time interviewing and more time hiring great people. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is Recruiting Roundtable. Until next time, happy hunting. Thanks, everyone.